Today we will be learning about the 1970s. There are many presidents in this time year, as well as many controversial aspects. We will begin with Nixon and go all the way through Carter's administration to the culture of the 70s. Nixon won the election by the silent majority, who are people known as the Forgotten Americans. He pledged to restore law and order and cut back democratic programs. He used programs instead of the welfare system and replaced it with the Family Assistance Plan, guaranteeing families a minimum income. The Senate reject the Senate rejected this program later on. When Nixon entered presidency, the economy was not in good shape. Since Vietnam War was taking place, government spending on social problems led us into a recession and unemployment on the rise. Inflation and unemployment both rose in the 1970s. This crisis is known as stagflation. Nixon worked on inflation and got it to slow down, which won him the president election in 1972 for a second term. A major problem making inflation go upwards was the rising cost of oil. Arab countries formed the Organization of Petroleum exporting countries and made oil prices skyrocket. The oil embargo caused an energy crisis in the United States. No one was worried about the environment when Nixon was in office until two events increased interest. That was the massive oil spill in Santa Barbara, California in 1969, and the second one was the first celebration of Earth Day in 1970. Nixon formed programs to help the environment and show his concern. For example, he created the Environmental Protection Agency, an agency with power to enforce environmental laws. Nixon had a belief in realpolitik, putting the United States first before moral or ethnical concerns. He wanted to have a foreign policy that would achieve a balance of power that would help reduce international conflict. The Soviet Union and the United States entered a period of detente, or the lessening of military and diplomatic tensions between countries. Nixon's secret activities escalated when his campaign involved criminal activity. This topic became known as the Watergate. Watergate was the name of the building in Washington, D.C. 5 men were caught breaking into the Watergate office of the Democratic National Committee with wiretap equipment and other spying devices. The 5 men were connected to the White House and was being paid with Nixon's campaign money. People wanted for Nixon to be impeached for his actions. On August 8, 1974, Nixon resigned as president rather than facing impeachment. On August 9, 1974, General Ford sworn in the new president of the United States. Ford granted Nixon a full, free, and absolute pardon. Ford's rating went down for his doing, and after this, Ford ran into problems. After problems, one of Ford's main goals was to combat inflation made matters worse. Ford carried on with Nixon's foreign policy of detente. Ford tried to maintain American influences in the Southeast Asia. He requested military aid from Cambodia and South Vietnam. However, Congress opposed and turned down Ford's request. In May 1975, Cambodian communists seized Mayaguez, a U.S. cargo ship. Ford launched military action to free the crew and ship. He was attempted with 2 assassinations. Jim Carter and Walter Mondale were only a few names that ran in the election of 1976. Barbara Jordan of Texas was the first African American woman elected to the Texas Senate. She was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives and also played a role in drawing up impeachment charges for Nixon. Jimmy Carter's campaign had a new approach to government. He promised to never lie to the American people. In a close election, he won 297 electoral votes to Ford's 240. Many hoped that Carter would be able to reverse the people's mistrust of the government. After 8 years, the Democrats returned back into the White House. Carter had an open administration and said if elected, he would keep in touch with the people, and that is exactly what he did. On his first full day in office, he announced an unconditional pardon. For most Vietnam-era draft invaders, the economy was beginning to build back up once Carter took office, but he wanted to see that it boosts even more. Carter did implement economic measures, such as a corporate tax cut, and he helped reduce unemployment. Carter called for voluntary wage and price controls to help inflation. Along with cuts in funding for social services, this became a failure and the economy took a turn back towards recession. The high cost of oil was a major problem. With the economic problems, the National Energy Act was created to control the price of natural gas. Carter was the exact opposite of Nixon in one issue. Nixon thought that people came second before the United States. Carter thought people were the key to everything. His new approach of foreign policy was noticeable to the era of human rights and rights of all people to freedom from unlawful detention or torture. He was a successful president, but he ran into some conflicts with the Middle East that cost him a second term. There were many fads in the 1970s, from the dance style to the music. The 70s was filled with many issues involving education and others. There were many laws passed, such as the Education Amendments Act, which outlawed sexual discrimination in higher education. The Education for All Handicapped Children Act was passed, stating the publics were required to provide education for children with physical and mental disabilities. The zero population involved the birth rate that replaces the existing population. We also had Americans that migrated from north and east to the south and west, seeking a warmer climate and a suburban lifestyle. The music in the 1970s became legendary. Some artists from that decade are still known to this day, such as Led Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix, and Bob Marley. This fashion in the 70s was quite colorful. Men wore their hair-long, bell-button pants, colorful patches on their clothing, while women wore colorful gypsy dresses and tie-dye shirts. Many fads were brought up, including mood rings, pet rocks, lava lamps, and running in the public places nude. The movies were of great interest. Some well-known movies in the 1970s were Annie Hale and George Lucas's Star Wars, which became the high-grossing movie. There were many fads, and to this day, we try to keep it alive.